Okay. Hey, Bill, welcome to this grand idea that you had. If we don't get arrested, thrown out, or ejected from the US of A, I think we'll be very, very successful.
Mike, at this stage of our career, how much do we care?
Well, it's kind of like, for all these people watching, and Bill and I were talking, we're saying, could this ruin our reputation? And I thought, we don't really care, do we?
Right. We got no dog in this fight.
Yeah, at this point in time, we need to say things, and I think it's time really to get off the dime and start to say things that aren't being said. After this pandemic, our air transportation planning is literally in the crane fixture. I mean, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's nonsense. It's fantasy land. We want to talk about what we do with our air transportation system, and it's like you were talking about airports. When I talk about airports, and the old line "It's not mine" is when you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. It's a whole system we need to work on, and I think that's what we want to do with this little program, and really not hold back. So,
well, that's one thing that you and I have been pretty good at for a long time, and so I mean, let's get at it.
Yeah, let's get at it, man. For the folks out there in television land, we're going to try to make this a regular agenda that we go over with certain things we talk about every video we're on. Right now, we're looking at, if I'm right, Bill, one every 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what we're right now. I mean, we'll start there and see where the hell it goes.
Yeah, and it could be rough. Just so everyone knows, I did try to call Otto Preminger to see if he wanted to direct this, but he's dead. So total rejection.
It's only fitting, man.
Whatever, I don't care. Who is the other guy? Some sex pervert Paris or somewhere. Anyway, we'll let that one go. We'll do it. So this is going to be maybe a little bit rough, but I guess, a little bit of our background for those people who don't know.
This one time. This one time, I'll let you ask me about my affairs.
For those people who don't know, I mean, I started in this racket in '71 as a gate agent at LaGuardia Airport. Been around a while, done a lot of things. Basically, either done or supervised just about everything in the airline business. Been very fortunate with that. Been with 4 airlines, 50 years. Boy, that sounds a little awful. But nevertheless, I maintain whatever experience you have, it's only the starting point for the next one. And I think this is our next one. But what we want to impart to the people is we see a different airline or aviation industry than a lot of other people are seeing right now. We wanted to talk about that and maybe give our advice about where it goes. Thoughts?
No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And, you started in this business and, working behind the counter. I started in this business as a flight attendant. And just really blessed with that. As crazy as it sounds, I went to training and, I went in as a North Central Airlines flight attendant. I came out as a Republic Airlines flight attendant. It was at a time when there was a merger a week. And Lord only knows, as employees at that time, I mean, the industry was upside down. I mean, it wasn't ready for deregulation. The unions were giving concessions every 9 months or so. And that's how I got involved. I became president of my local union, did one of the first employee stock ownership plans in the industry, tried to borrow at 24 years old, tried to borrow $400 million to buy Republic. Didn't buy Republic, but was sitting in Citibank's office when in walked Stephen Wolf, and the world changed. And the airline ultimately got sold to Northwest in 1986. And the good news is all of the employees got every dollar of their concessions back. And then, it's a great story.
Well, I think but it also gives us background. And somebody could say, look, wait a minute, all this experience you guys have, and does that really make you better at giving advice or consulting? The answer is hell yes. Yeah. I mean, this is years of seeing the rights and the wrongs. And what we're seeing now, Bill, and we saw a couple of things that launched us on this, about the direction that the air transportation system in America is going today is bogus. I mean, the Pied Piper of Hamelin, you wouldn't even hold a union card to the crap that's going on here. And we'll
Yeah.
talk about that. So I think what we're looking at here is a number of sections here. The first one that I think, Bill, you talked about is let's look under the wing and see what's going on outside the line of sight of what's going on in the airline industry.
Yeah. Mike, I've got three things that, kind of touch on this morning. And, the first is I know we're going to have airline folks listening in. I know we're going to have airport folks listening in. And more than likely, we're going to have concession and supplier folks listening in. That supply chain is a mess. And the thing is, though, if you just think about it, after on March the 12th, 2020, people started saying, I'm going to lay off people, right? I don't know where this thing's going. Well, I continue to lay off people, and the airline lays off people, the airport's laying off people, the vendors are laying off people, supply chains get broken. And I've got to rebuild those supply chains. And right now, you just look at what's going on at the airport. And to me, the horror story of the holidays was a picture in the baggage claim area of National Airport, with bags from one side to the other. And who knew where the people were?
Well, you see, the problem with that too is, and I've had people that do, they get on the phone and it's welcome to Trans-Deficit Airlines. Thank you for calling. Your whole time is 7 hours, 23 minutes. And that doesn't include the typhoon that's going to knock out our Manila base, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was going on even before this,
Right.
where the idea was we'll take a chance on it working, but, in a service industry, and again, keep in mind the supply chain that has to come back isn't going to come back to the same industry. We have a different air transportation industry, different airport industry.
And a different workforce, I fear. I mean, I don't know if I fear that, but we're going to have one. The second thing I think we've just got to think about and probably accept at some point, there are going to be vaccine inequities around the world. Rich nations are going to hoard the vaccine. And where it is that those countries that don't have vaccines are going to be nothing more than laboratories for other mutations, are people going to be comfortable flying? And I think, we're going to have to just get comfortable that we're going to live with COVID for a long time.
Yeah, I think, or the outcome of COVID for a long time. I mean, take a look. I've had this discussion with a number of financial institutions. What about international service? Are you going to take your family to go to the lake country of Italy when you don't know whether it's going to be shut down? For crying out loud, that's not going to happen. And I really want to go along with people like, our friends at United is saying, it's going to come back. I hope they're right. I don't see it. And another thing you brought back with the issue of the supply chain and airports. Airports are going to see 100 million fewer passengers this year, 2022, than 2019. 100 million fewer. What does that mean to airport facility planning? That might mean, you mentioned concessions. We don't need, the foot massage. We don't need Vino Loco or whatever the hell it is, because there's not going to be people to probably man those things, and you have a revenue change. And what I'm saying to airports, you better start to rethink this because it's not going to come back.
But man, you think about that just for the airports alone and how it is they negotiate contracts with airlines and, the cost of using the airport and all those things, those practices are decades old. I mean, we're probably going to have to start to rethink that. And I know that doesn't make people at Lee Fisher happy, but you know what? The old way is probably not going to be the right way in the post-COVID era world.
Well, let's look at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, or the people running San Francisco, the people running O'Hare, or they're not in jail or whatever, but nevertheless, the people that are running these big airports, okay, a lot of their costs are there. You got the union costs, you got the labor, you've got the upkeep and all that. So what that means is for an airline, they're going to have to look at probably some significantly increased airport costs because they're not going to get covered by a lot of things like concessions. There's just not going to be people buying hot dogs. I know that doesn't sound right, but write this down, everybody. We're not going back to 2019. It's not happening. And I think that's what we have to really start to recognize. How do we plan for that? And one of the things that got us rocking and rolling on this thing was there's crazy stuff out there where you've got studies being given to airports and communities that are saying it's all going to come back just like it was before. No, it's not. You know, I've given the example, you know, with these big cutbacks, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Historically, they had 12,000 passengers a year, O&D, to Atlanta on Delta. Delta leaves, those passengers disappeared. They're not going somewhere else. They're not traveling. So the whole travel patterns are going to change as airlines change. And I don't care how many speed date meetings these poor misled airports get suckered into, it's not going to change it.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know, the only thing that I think is important about 2019 at this point is it's at least a benchmark. We understood the old system, and if we didn't understand the old system, we can't appreciate how the new system's evolving. And so I think it's very, very important there. What was a local and a connecting passenger in 2019 is probably not going to be a local and a connecting passenger in 2023.
Right, and part of that is the business shift, and I hope some airlines are right about it. Look, I mean, like I've said, we've probably had 35, maybe 40 high-level meetings with clients, with airports, with lawyers, with whatever in the last year. It's all been done from sitting here. I made one business trip, and this is us. Now,
Right.
what does that tell you about the value of business travel in the supply or in the communications chain? It's going to be different. It's not going away, but it's going to be different. We've got to recognize that. And then, you know, there's a lot of other issues with that we have to look at. How many airlines are out there? You know, I've seen these small airports come back and say, we went to leap start, jump start, you know, fall down flat dead, whatever the meeting was, for a 20-minute meeting. And I met with 8 airlines.
Isabel saying, Chris gonna find Ray Charles.
My answer to that is, an airport your size, you wasted your time meeting very, very nice people. But your airport has no more chance of getting Southwest Airlines than getting, you know, Mars International. It's not happening. And we got to start to recognize what air transportation is to these communities and to these regions, rather than just go out and we're going to find more airlines. That is Pied Piperism. And very honestly, I think it's dishonest Pied Piperism, to be blunt.
You know, I totally agree with you. And, you know, you and I have talked about regionalization for as long as I can remember. And this is just a trend that has been, you know, it's kind of a trend that's been happening one lost departure at a time, right? It's drip, drip, drip. Well, we're finally now at that place where I think we're playing the next to the last chapter right now. And the next to the last chapter is really, you know, I look at what United did a few weeks ago when they cut whatever. But what all they did is they didn't move out of an airport. They just reduced the number of hubs the consumer had a choice to fly over. And so that's the penultimate chapter. The ultimate chapter is when an airline exits. And we're headed there.
They did do exit. I mean, they just exited.
Well, they did some exit,
you know,
but not all.
Yeah, well, and in all cases, the airport had other options. But like with Fort Walton Beach, oh, we've got plenty of service. You got a lot of service with Allegiant, which is wonderful, but that's not air service. That really is a spend option for a number of communities to go down there and get a suntan on the beach. But they did lose access to the Houston connecting hub, and people act like that's nothing. Well, it is not nothing. But you're right about this. And look, and it's happened. Look, let me put up this. I'm going to put up a little map here to show you. And I think you brought this up. These are the communities across America that have gone out of complete business, turned into ghost towns, because they lost scheduled passenger service at the local airport.
Yep.
None. It's not happened. I could put up the same map and say how many have suffered tremendous economic disaster. None. I mean, years ago, we're doing work for the state of Michigan. We were desperately trying to keep air service in Jackson, Michigan. I mean, you go down to I-94, you can see Detroit, you know, and that's gone. Has Jackson, Michigan?
Doesn't even have to be a clear day.
Yeah, it was exactly right. You know, that pollution issue. But nevertheless, these are the kind of things, but unfortunately, people haven't recognized it. Kalamazoo losing access to Chicago. Well, guess what? With United, well, guess what? United's taking it at Grand Rapids, just like the people that are at Jackson are going to Motown. No, they're not going down the street to Lansing. That has been going on, but we've been fighting it. And
Right.
this is just nonsense. And this is where I used to tell airports, go to these jumpstart meetings and all that, because if nothing else, you can tell the board, you can tell the CDC, and the rest of the people who are totally uninformed of what air transportation is. And I've met with Southwest. I'm saying now, don't go to those, because you're perpetrating the lie that you met with 8 airlines for this little town in your town you work for in Pennsylvania or somewhere. You're lying to them by telling them that was a possibility getting air service. You tell them I had cocktails with people, but don't say you met with airlines, because you didn't. And this is the kind of nonsense that we're going to have to start to look at. And it means, like my Altoona example, 20 years ago to a Japanese company, Altoona was a fish. Today, they could go there with or without air service because they do what you and I are doing here. So communities all across America can still attract a lot of investment, and they don't need to have scheduled passenger service at the local airport.
Mike, as you say that, I'm just thinking about tomorrow's Jumpstart. It's going to be run by economic development agencies. And what it's going to be is how do you serve a region, because there's not the right kind of airplanes to serve every airport that used to be served commercially. And it should be economic development agencies that are pulling people together to say, we need to talk about this.
Well, and talk about alternatives.
Right.
Because I mean, some of these places, Worland, Wyoming, there is no alternative. Let's stop with this.
Yeah.
Let's stop with going to these things. I met with Contour, great airline and all that, but they're not going to do anything for you. I mean,
Right.
Let's talk about new communication channels to keep us connected. And as long as we are misled by these clowns that keep doing leakage studies and keep doing these true market studies, all based upon data that doesn't make any sense, we're not going to make progress in connecting America to the rest of the world. And that may not include air transportation in some cases.
Yeah, it's gonna mean having to dispel an awful lot of belief that has been pounded into people for as long as I've been in the business. It's been a long time.
Well, the problem is you've got a whole genre of people that frankly are misleading others. I mean, it goes for example, San Antonio, Henry Cisneros, the former mayor, the former, I don't know what kind of a seat warmer he was in the Clinton administration or whatever. He was head of the chamber down there. And he made it public that our service here in San Antonio really sucks. We don't have enough nonstop service here and nonstop service there. Now he's coming from the position, all we have to do is hire another consultant, of which they have hired, more consultants than, Napoleon had with the Grand Armée. And it's not going to do anything because he's uninformed. And he hurt his community by making the statements and saying San Antonio's got great air service and we're going to have even better. They said, it's not really good. Well, that company was going to go there. They're up in Austin, which is another dynamic that we're missing. Austin, when I was a regional director for Braniff in San Antonio was as big as Dallas, the city, not the Metroplex.
Yep.
And we were much bigger than Austin. Today,
Hey, Mike,
Austin,
you've kind of look up.
I've got it sinking here.
I
Well,
lost
all right.
it. You're thinking, man.
It's that chair thing, But then again, I tried to get Otto Preminger and he turned his head.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, so
I just trying to bring you back.
Yeah, just bring me back. But anyway, you have Austin, which was much smaller than San Antonio. Today, they're 40% bigger in terms of air traffic. They're not a connecting hub. They got 2 airlines to London. Why?
Yeah.
You had economic growth there. And economic growth is going to change things, and migration. Places like Boise, Spokane, that's where they're going to see it. And I don't care how many studies you do, it's not going to change it. We have to identify that and move ahead with it.
No, it's absolutely right. And, one of the things I think about, I know you're looking at data that you really didn't rely on like you used to rely on some other databases. I never thought I was gonna read supply chain newsletters every day. Hell, I know more about the last mile than I ever cared about. But the fact of the matter is, it matters.
It does matter.
And so,
yeah.
It's kind of like, for me, I mean, one of the publications that I think is great is what Jay Shabbat's doing with Econ Weekly. I mean, where are things moving, man? Right.
Well, I think he's on something there. Rail is a big thing. We haven't been involved in it, but what I've seen with rail, where if you get your container ship unloaded in LA, it takes 4 days to get out of LA on a train,
Right.
these are things that we've totally ignored over the years. And I think it's affecting air transportation as well. And too often people think it'll grow, it'll grow, it'll grow. Again, it's a different type of transportation system. And I think airports are going to have to start to tumble to this. Stop with the stupid ass studies. I mean, any airport director should know what air service his airport, his region needs. If you have to bring in somebody to tell you that, you probably want to look at your retirement program because you're not doing a very good job. You should know that anyway, rather than just go and blindly hit at the air service pinata and hope Southwest comes out. I mean,
I have no response for that.
I mean, we let that go. But before, so we all get electrocuted here. Why don't we move on to, this was your idea, point counterpoint.
Yeah.
Remember, most of this was your idea. So friends, if this is not going over well, it's Bill.
It's my fault.
I'm the caboose on this train.
It is. Oh, Jesus. Okay. And I mean, this is yours, so I'm going to throw this back. And your point was, who cares how many airports are out there? And that's absolutely right. I mean, it really doesn't matter how many airports. What it is that I want to make sure is that people living at X are within a reasonable driving distance of an airport that has more than 2 frequencies a day with a small jet.
And you open up all these little things about define reasonable, that's an issue because I mean, right now today, if an hour's drive is nothing, and an hour's drive
Right.
is 30 miles in Nassau County, and an hour's drive is 100 miles in Wyoming.
Right.
So I think you're right, but you bring up an issue here that we've got to recognize that airports do different things. You've got Teterboro, a lot of totally different than Newark, real close, but totally different. Oakland County Airport up in Michigan, close to Motown, totally different.
Second biggest airport in Michigan.
And what we have to, and nobody's heard of it. They think I've been to California. No, that's not wrong. Oakland, but I think what we have to do is start to look at, and you brought this up with me on another venue, but we have 600 airports, whatever the airports are. And I'm glad we built them. The question is, at some point in time, we're going to have a hard look and say, are they economically covering their nut? And if they're not, we've got to think about it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about, what's been pounded into our head is that if I don't have air service, I'm economically hurt. And that if I don't have it, there's no economic driver. And you go and talk about different communications channels where it is the rural America is probably better connected to the to commerce today than it has been in the last 40 years. Absolutely. And we just have to start to change our thinking about that. We need air service, but probably, if 3 airports come together, and the fact that airplanes are getting bigger, my bet is the consumer is going to have more choice. By 1 + 1 + 1 is going to be greater than 3.
And that brings in the other issue, which is new fleets. We were talking about Grand Rapids, and I maintain Grand Rapids will have service to London in 5 years. The reason being is we have new fleets. This A321 XLR, which is blowing Boeing out of the mix. That airplane is like a 707-300, about the same seating, bigger seats, by the way. So these clowns, it'll be a cramped airplane. A recently retired person from Wall Street Journal was telling us that, but then again, that's why he's retired. The thing is that airplane can get across the Atlantic, an A220-300. It can fly from Providence to Buffalo, and it can fly from Providence to Heathrow. Very flexible fleets, and that's going to change that. And what that means is more and more people are going to be going to Grand Rapids, rather than flying out of Lansing. I mean, we've kicked poor old Muskegon, camshaft capital of the world, all around, but we finally gave up on them. You've got a great air service. It's called Grand Rapids. more and more Grand Rapids type things are going to come about. We're already seeing it with Austin. We're seeing it with New Orleans sucking the I-10 corridor dry. It's going to be something very, very different. But we can't go on trying to recreate the past. And there's too many entities out there selling this snake oil that we're going to recreate the past. You're not. Look at the future and embrace it. You know, years ago, we did a project, Lufkin and Nacogdoches joined together. Now, this is a while ago. And they wanted us to do a study, which airport would be the best to be served. I think it was by Lone Star, somebody like that. And they chose Nacogdoches.
Dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. I can't even spell it. But Lufkin, instead of saying, good, we'll do this, they pulled out of the deal and wouldn't pay for the study. You know, I mean, it's that serious, if you will. We've got to stop with this. We have the automobile. You brought that up. We got the air transportation system. We have road hubbing. We've got to get away from the study after study after study. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. If I can, Mike, let me throw some numbers out there. Okay. And so right now, there are 260 airports that are defined as non-hub airports by the FAA. Those 260 airports are within 180 miles of a larger airport in the 48 contiguous states. 178 of those 260 lie within 180 miles of an average of 5 larger airports. 82 of the 260 airports are essential air service airports. Each of the 82 lies within an average, each of 3 larger airports. At a time, you know, when resources are constrained here, I look, God bless Jim Oberstar. He was my representative when I lived in Duluth, Minnesota. But his definition of essential in 1978 that was necessary to get the Airline Deregulation Act passed needs redefined.
Yeah, let's talk Hibbings, you know, that kind of thing. No, and that's
I
really
thought that's
true.
just more Bobby Zimmerman, Bob Dylan. I mean, that's all I know about Hibbing.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you've got a very good point. I think everybody who is looking at this needs to start to rethink that. Now, we built a great airport system. When these people say we haven't built an airport, no, beat up LaGuardia. I grew up at LaGuardia. It was a wonderful airport. You know, no, it wasn't third world. I mean, it was small, but we fixed that. And we have small airports around the country. So the question comes up is, EAS is a giant waste. It's a giant waste in most cases. We've got to do something with that because, you know, that's just something, and politicians can't. I would recommend any politician, don't take it on. All you're going to do is lose votes. So it's locked in there. But just let's recognize, you know, putting 3 or 4 people on a caravan, hopefully there's no icing going on, you know, it doesn't do much for anybody. So we have to start to look at that down the road and maximize our air transportation system. Look at what Amazon is doing, and they're just the start of logistics. That ATR 72 can be your distribution point in Lander, Wyoming. I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to start to look at and look beyond, look at new transportation systems, new logistics systems, rather than go back and say, how they get scheduled air service in there. I'll go to the jump store. You know, that's stupid. That's just dumb.
You know, but also too, I mean, it's just, and God bless the airport system and the drive for the PFC, but we've really got to appreciate that not all airports are created equal here. And if we're, and until we appreciate that, we can't really start to think about, you know, combining airports. You know, the airlines consolidated for a reason. They consolidated to get rid of redundant costs and redundant service. Why are we not thinking about the same thing with respect to combining airports out there, getting rid of redundant cost and redundant service that's being duplicated down the road? I would rather take the duplication, get on the highway, and probably get service to another point on the system rather than 2 flights a day to the same point.
But how do we and also what's the opportunities of repurposing those other airports? Like I said, with logistics, training. I've asked airports, is you got an FBO? Yeah. You have an electrician working there? Hey, changes light bulbs. No, I'm talking about changing that Simmons engine that's coming in on that little light airplane. I mean, training like that, things like that. We've got to think beyond this nonsense that we've got to schedule. I mean, pardon me, I mentioned there was some guy who was in Nebraska a few years ago. City father said, "We don't care where it goes as long as we get scheduled air service." Check,
Yeah.
please. You know, that has to. We have to start to rethink that, and it's hard to do. But study after study, assumption after assumption that scheduled air service can be at every local airport. We've got to educate politicians first. I mean, like Henry Cisneros, he's gone. But the local mayor that thinks go to Jumpstart and you'll find more airlines. You got to tell the mayor there are no more airlines, Mr. Mayor. And it's like we talked about that one study we saw that said what the airport needs to do to get more air service is to have a better social media program. I mean, that kind of nonsense has to stop. You know, what we have to do is say, wait a minute, you got a great airport, but this is what you can do and this is what you can't do.
Yeah.
That's, they're getting fed a lot of pap.
But you know, Mike, every board of directors has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the asset is maximizing its potential.
Exactly.
And because the mayor wants to spend $1 million on air service for the sake of air service, that's really unfortunate because, as you say, I mean, just look at what's going on in the Southwest United States today. There's more damn cranes in the desert of Arizona building new manufacturing facilities that are going to need an airport that we don't know. There's might not be an airport there. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's going on today that, you know,
well,
I mean, you got to pay attention to it.
To 2025 versus 2019, our Airports USA forecast shows that the Rocky Mountain region is going to grow 30%, 25 over 20 over the pre-pandemic. The mid-Atlantic states are going to decline in terms of passenger traffic because there's people moving around. We've got to accept that and embrace it and anticipate it and stop trying to maintain the same supply chain we had 2 years ago. And again, that's very hard to do, but well, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of people out there selling pablum, and that's really misleading a lot of people.
Yeah. And
anyway,
you know what? I want to get to that place in 2025, but man, I'm concerned about where are we going to find the people to do the work that allows us to get to 2025? This workforce issue for me is my number one impediment to growing the economy, growing the system, growing.
well, the point is, we'll grow to what we can actually staff. I mean, I don't think we have a pilot shortage. We have a pilot situation, which is far more serious than a shortage, I believe, because, you know, but I think we'll figure a way because people are moving. I mean, you know, we had a situation where we had to invest some money real quick because we sold our office building. First place I went was Boise. Love Boise. You can't buy diddly in Boise. You can't buy an outhouse in Boise. Nothing is for sale in Boise because people are moving there. So I think that's the kind of issue that we have to deal with. But I agree with you. We may not have as robust a service economy as we used to.
Yeah.
You know, McDonald's might be all push button to get the Big Mac and fries and change back from your dollar.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, we've all kind of talked about robotics forever. I hope they can make them fast enough.
Oh yeah, and they're the ones you call. Well, when your bag doesn't come through, you get misconnected in Chicago with the family. You know, robotics don't do diddly squat for you. I mean, you know, I got to tell you, a kiosk is always polite, but a kiosk can't tell you what to do when your flight canceled. You know,
right.
But we'll work it out. Final point here. This is what you brought up. Something called you've got one job to do, and we want to pick out entities that probably haven't done that job. So you're on a roll.
So, you know, most people on this call are familiar with this. You know, it's kind of College Game Day, ESPN. You know, you've got one job to do and it's a punter falling down. I mean, you know, whatever. I'm just going to call out the US commercial airline industry on this. You've got one job to do, and that is to deliver a product to the consumer that the consumer believes it bought. I appreciate Omicron. I appreciate everything that happened over the holidays. That was an embarrassment. But what happened what happened back in the early summer when suddenly vaccines showed up. And everybody said, oh my God, the availability of vaccines is here. We need to put as much capacity into the air as we possibly can. And we couldn't deliver the product as fast as vaccine availability. We got to be careful of that, because I'm going to tell you, we can talk about all the business travel in the world coming back. Those pictures over the holidays, for me, I'm going to place a bet on business and general aviation, because if I'm a business traveler and that's what I'm seeing, thanks very much.
Well, I think business aviation it's growing and it's an opportunity, but it doesn't have any sex appeal. Bringing in a couple more, G4s into the local airport, not the same thing as American saying, we just got service to Dallas. So all of the G4s are going to probably do more for you economically than the stinking 50-seat jet trying to get to Dallas.
But again, that's the repurpose thing, right, Mike?
That's the repurpose and rethinking thing. And I think, again, we've got to start calling it like it is, and we have been doing that. Now, my side of this is, let me just talk about our friends on Wall Street. Friends, whatever, on Wall Street for a minute. If McDonald's came out and said, we're going to sell 25% fewer Big Macs, you have certain analysts covering that sector that would run around and jump in their water dishes trying to figure out why. If you had FedEx saying, there's a whole area of the world we're just not going to be able to work in anymore, the same thing there. These analysts would be going nuts. They'd be calling FedEx, they'd be doing all kinds of stuff, having out-of-body experiences. We just had Boeing, which, they've finally gotten the Max out of jail most everywhere. And they've been cut out of China. China's 25% of their market. They haven't sold or delivered an airplane in China since this mess began. And now with the geopolitical nonsense going on and China reneging on every agreement they ever made, no one's saying anything. Now, Boeing has a nice backlog, but as far as the Max goes, it's out of the China market. And nobody in Washington is doing anything about it. Nobody's saying anything about it, but they're our biggest exporter. And I just wonder, I just maintain there are a lot of people in several industries, the finance industry being one, that don't want to offend certain people across the Pacific. And I think that's our biggest challenge happening here, because we've got places like Renton, we got places like Wichita, we got places like Charleston. We're talking about economic harm from this. Nobody's saying anything. So I'll leave it at that. But I found out very recently with LinkedIn, you do not criticize China or they censor you. So if this might get censored, you might censor me. I don't know.
I've censored you for 40 years.
Well, I just wonder,
Yeah.
You and I know that. Go ahead.
Delta has canceled its China service through October.
Well, yeah.
I saw something this morning.
Well,
it was like, wow.
They did a mid-air turnaround because they found out when it gets to Shanghai, every seat has to be cleaned. And I know, believe me, this isn't a bottle of 409 they're using, and it's going to charge a fortune. But secondly, remember what they had on that airplane? Mostly Chinese coming home. There weren't American businessmen on that. So this is a good excuse for them, because we're not going to have the 8 million people. We've gone through this before in 2019 that flew US China. We might have 300,000 or 400,000. That place is closed down. But the real issue is they had agreed to buy a lot of US goods. They've reneged on all that. And I think nobody in Wall Street really has said anything about it, even though it's jobs in Charleston that are on the line.
Before we close this thing up, I can't help myself. I was reading this morning early, and I was reading a press release from JetBlue yesterday, where it is that, they announced they were going to pull down a bunch of slow things down for a while to catch up. And they were talking about Bozeman. That was a new market for them last year, and kind of hidden in this press release. However, as demand has recovered, the pre-crisis travel patterns have started to return. Business traffic has started to come back. leisure traffic has returned to other pre-crisis pools, including Europe. As a result, the big destinations in 2020 and 2021 might not be the best bet in 22 and beyond. And you and I have talked a lot about product substitution. There we go. If anybody's extrapolating their trend line right now,
Yep.
bless
Well,
you.
keep in mind, I believe that leisure travel as a component of household spend has gone way up on the chain because I want to get the hell out of Dodge. I want to take a trip. I've been locked in here with COVID or whatever the hell it is. So now leisure travel is a more important spend pattern than we might think it is. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but I do know this, like Bozeman, and that is, I'm here in Colorado. Bozeman is the best air served ski destination in America with Big Sky. Big Sky's a way down the road, but nevertheless, that's the access point. That's because spend is there. And we have friends like Bill Tomsich, who's in that area of the air service area. He maintains some of these spends like ski traffic aren't going to get harmed. So we'll see what happens.
Gotcha.
Well, I think we're going to end it right there for all of you out there in TV land. We appreciate your patience. We're going to try to hone this down a little bit more as we go forward, but we're always going to have some comments that are going to be a little bit different. But right now, one of the things we're constantly pointing out is a lot of the planning direction is trying to recreate 2019. And when you try to chase the past, you'll end up there. Anyway, with that, Bill, are we finished?
I have nothing left in the tank, but I do hope that the folks that have listened in will get back to us, whether it is you didn't like what you heard, you liked what you heard, or some things that you would like us to talk about in a future deal.
Yeah, but I'll put this up on the screen. It's going to be Unvarnished at aviationplanning.com. We'll just use that if that works for you. Unvarnished at aviation. Say whatever you want. And particularly if you disagree, don't sit there like a nebbish. Let us know. Okay?
I want to hear more from people who disagree than, oh, that was great.
Yeah, we knew that. We knew the great part. We agree with that. So tell us what's screwed up. With that, I think we'll sign off and we'll see you 2 weeks from today.